Who would our dream podcast guest be? Also, I want to talk about the life of Judah and how it transformed through the life of Joseph. Today on Deep Dives, episode 40.
Josh, how's it going, buddy? Doing all right?
I'm doing all right.
Okay, fresh from Cupcake Con.
Yeah.
And in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yes.
Wow.
Pastry Con, yeah.
Pastry
yeah.
Con. I still like to call it Cupcake Con.
Yep. It's
Pastry
yeah.
Con.
There were a lot of those there too.
Was it?
Yeah, but yeah, the reason we didn't record an episode last week is because I was out of town.
Yeah.
Once a year. Well, I say once a year. This is actually the first time this event was offered. But my wife, she's a pastry chef, and went to Cordon Bleu and all that kind of stuff. And she was interested in this event. This year was the first time it had ever been held. It was National Pastry Conference.
About it.
2024, and it was up in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yeah.
So we've gone to a couple similar ones. Like there was Cookie Con last year, and there's been like Cake Con and stuff like that we've gone to. And she saw this one that was just Pastry Con. So we went to that. It was a lot of fun.
You up there for a week?
We drove up Wednesday and got into Charlotte about 2 in the morning, and got a room, went to pastry conference Thursday, Friday, Saturday, drove back Sunday.
Wow. Y'all aren't afraid to do that, are you? Just get in the car at night and drive all night and get there.
I like driving at night a lot better because there's fewer people on the road.
That's true.
Yeah.
And you don't have a problem staying awake.
Usually no.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'll like, if I get tired, I'll, pull off and take a nap or something like that.
Yeah.
But but usually I plan on driving at night, so I'll try to get a little rest beforehand.
Okay.
But also at night. Now, this sounds bad. It's not. But excuse me. One of the things I love to do while I'm driving long distance is either listen to podcasts or music or lectures or something like that, or I'll put my tablet on the center console or my phone or whatever, and I'll stream a movie or something. Not that I'm watching it,
right?
Because I'm watching the road.
It.
Yeah, but I can listen to it.
Yeah.
And my wife and I were working our way through the Star Trek universe, and we're on the series Voyager. So we watched several. I say we watched several. On the way up, we watched, I think, one episode because she fell asleep almost immediately and was asleep almost the entire 9-hour drive.
Good for her. That's good.
But on the way back, we watched a lot.
Okay, gotcha. I like doing that too. I used to do that when I drove from Wilmington, North Carolina to Jacksonville to visit my buddy Steve, and I would put Andy Griffith on and just listen to it because I've seen the episodes so many times.
Oh, yeah.
It's like I see the movie in my mind. You know what I mean? And it made time go by so fast. I really loved it.
There was this episode of Star Trek, the original series, where Captain Kirk is transported back. I think, he's transported back in time, and he becomes close to this the female character in this one episode, who was from that era. And as they're walking down the street, the scenery behind him looks really familiar. He passes a barber shop and a town courthouse or whatever. It was the Andy Griffith set.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's good. Josh, guess what?
Yeah.
We have a question. One of our YouTube viewers has a question for us.
Yes.
And you gave it away you talked about it in the intro. I'll just read the whole thing.
Okay.
I always look forward to when a new episode posts. My only complaint is the episodes are not long enough, but I understand you have lives outside of this podcast. Regarding podcast, here's my first question. If you could invite any 2 guests, living or dead, to join you on an episode, who would they be and why? So who would they be and why? We could do one, one each or something.
So let's start with the first part of that.
Yeah.
The length of our podcast. When when we started this a couple years ago, it was just, we wanted to record conversations that we normally have.
Right.
And wide-ranging topics. When we transitioned over to being part of a family of podcasts of Marcus Point Baptist Church, we were, there's the pastor's podcast, which I think only has 3 episodes. It's very, very seldom that he does one, but it's a short 8-minute episode that deals specifically with a question. He does the question, knocks it out, publishes.
One take and gone.
Yep. There's the Pour Over podcast, which is kind of more lighthearted. It's very topical. And then there's ours, which is the deep dive. And originally, when we were talking about the format of it, it was suggested, what if it's a long, Joe Rogan length podcast, which is several hours.
That's right.
But then we only publish maybe once a month, and that didn't really work because you and I, neither of us are staff here at church. We have our own means of employment. We're both self-employed, and so setting aside several hour chunk during the week is really difficult.
Yes.
But for several years, we had already got accustomed to doing a 1 hour shot. And so we decided to stay with that format, and instead of doing 1 4-hour chunk at the end of the month, we do 4 1-hour chunks.
That's right.
Dispersed throughout the month. So
Yeah.
It just worked better with our schedules.
It did.
As it is, I have my phone ringer turned off so that people don't hear the constant buzzing and texts of stuff, because Thursdays and Fridays are usually the days that I designate to be out in the field meeting with clients and going to job sites and stuff like that. So that's why this works really well on Thursdays or Fridays.
It works well with our real lives.
Yeah,
that's what it does.
Yep.
We've made it a priority, and this is the best way we can get it done to be consistent.
Yep. Now, when we were starting it, we were meeting on Fridays, which was great because the different things I'm involved in, a lot of times we take inspiration for the podcast from the Sunday morning sermon,
Right.
And between Sunday and Wednesday, I would have that opportunity to sort of brainstorm the podcast, but then I would spend a majority of my time working on my lesson for our Bible study in our small group, the Gun Club. And then I would have all of Thursday to finish and fine-tune the stuff for the deep dive. Well, then, now that we're recording first thing Thursday morning, I go from Wednesday night almost instantly to Thursday morning. So the only downside to Thursday is that I'm usually not as prepared as I would otherwise like to be.
Right. Gotcha. Okay.
So this morning I started. I got up about 5:30, and started or finished. Tried to finish compiling my notes for today.
Well, also you came into the studio. You and Chris came into the studio very early to work on our audio concerns that we've been having in the last couple episodes. So. This is the sound now as a result of that, and if something else is wrong, we'll do the same thing.
We're still tweaking things. There's lighting issues, and this studio is used by 4 potentially 5 podcasts in the near future as we add one for the seniors. And all of us have different settings on the same board. And so it's difficult when we're not communicating with each other what those settings are and what we've changed to come in and have to try to refigure it all out.
It is.
Fortunately, this one, this board that you and I got that were, kind of gave to the podcast efforts of the church, has the ability to save settings. So I got to figure that out.
Yeah.
So we can just load it in and go.
Right. It's a good board. It's a great board for people like us that don't want to spend a lot of time figuring everything out. It's made for podcasts. It is. And it's made to have several different settings, like you said. But you've got to know the settings. You've still got to know exactly what it is. So we've got 2 engineers, you and Chris, working on this. So it does take some time to go through and read all the settings, get it all worked out. But
our guests.
Yeah, our guests, living or dead. Who would you like to, I guess, interview or have on the podcast?
Yeah, that's a good one. What would you say?
This is not going to be a surprise to people if they know me.
You would want me?
I would like to know. Except for you and Chris.
I get my dream guest every week.
That's good. I would like to interview Lance Armstrong.
Mm-hmm.
I would.
That's what I was going to guess.
Yeah, I would, because he's been through so much, and I was and I still am. I was a huge Lance Armstrong fan. Whenever I was in the depth of my cycling career, he was kicking butt and taking names, man. He was 7 straight Tour de France's, dominating. But it's not easy. If you look back on the record, so 7 straight, man, he must have been killing it. Yeah, he was killing it, and he was dominating. But it wasn't easy. He always had one team or one person that was right on his tail. They were so close, and he had to work, and it didn't all come together as easy as it may look on the record books. Well, the record books now says he didn't win any Tour de France. They stripped him of every one of them.
Yeah.
And I actually met him a couple of times, shook his hand, got his autograph, and saw it. And just seeing somebody that is at the pinnacle of the sport that you are in, it brings it's a uplifting experience, knowing, at my amateur level cycling, how hard it is to see somebody take it to another level like that with all as a job. It was crazy. And what he went through with falling from grace, and all the people that he disappointed in the cancer community, all this stuff. Whatever you think of him, he's got he won't call it a testimony because he's admitted not a believer, but he has a testimony to have disappointed so many people. And if you ask him, from what I've seen, it's more the cancer community that he's concerned about. He's asked to be back in that community. He's done that publicly. He said, I want back in. I want to start, doing good things for the cancer community again. Because the dude, he had I think a 10% chance of survival. Yeah. He had cancer all over. I mean, his lungs, just all over. In his brain, he had it, man. I mean, unreal how he came back and got back on the bike. I've got back on the bike after having open heart surgery, after having a broken femur. No, I haven't competed since open heart surgery, but after I broke my femur, came back and competed again and won on an amateur level. For him to come back and do what he did, it's not all about the drugs that he was doing. It's simply not. And it took me a while. My concern with him is that the way he dealt with it. Right. He was a bully. He was, in my opinion, he was a bully. But him doping, I'll be honest with you, it's disappointing. But I know the reality of even very small competition, and it doesn't give you a huge advantage. Yeah, it does not. Especially if you're confident that the people that you're competing against are doing this. There's no way you're going to win without doing it. Yeah. That being said, it doesn't give you a huge advantage. It brings you back up to playing level. That's what it does. And I always use this example in my own mind when I'm telling a story about how just a 0.5% of power can help. I was in a race in I think it was Louisiana, and there was one hill in this race. I had my team with me. I think it was Subaru at the time, and my buddy Darryl Williams and I were racing. And my second of 3 or 4 laps, my cable broke. My gear cable broke for my rear derailleur. I still had my front derailleur, which means I had 2 gears. I was stuck in my biggest gear in the back, which means it's very difficult to pedal, slow RPMs. And I realized, I thought, man, I'm out. I don't know. I can't get up at this one hill with this big gear and still stay on the peloton. Then I realized, oh wait a minute, I have my front one too, and that one geared down a little bit, so I had 2 gears. So it's slightly easier gear and a very hard gear. So I said, I'm I'm not giving up. I'm in this thing. And I talked to Daryl while there was a slow part in the race. I said, man, if you help me get up that hill, I'll keep working for you, because I was a domestique working for him. He was a sprinter. So my job is to get up front and go as hard as I can for a certain period of time and drop people. If they can't stay on this pace that I'm setting, then I would pull off, take a breather, get up front and do it again. Get up front and do it again. I loved doing that. I was feeling fantastic that day, man. There was nothing anybody could do with. I was dictating the pace.
Yeah.
And that's whenever you're dictating what everybody else has to do, you're in control of this race. So I felt like I was in control, and I could really help Daryl. Daryl's one of the best sprinters, the best sprinter I've ever raced with. So I knew he could take it to the end if I could get him there. So at the very last hill, I got up the hill the last time, next to the last time, okay. The last time I wasn't going to make it without his help. So what I did, like I did every time before that after breaking my cable, I got up to the very front, and I would slowly fade to the back as people were passing me. And then I would do my best to get onto the back and stay with that pace. And I was doing that okay. The last lap, I said, Daryl, I don't have the strength to do it again. He said, all right, well, just do what you were doing. Get up front, and I'll help you. And I didn't know what he was talking about. I said, all right. So I did that, and whenever he saw me fading back, he put his hand out and put it right on the bottom of my right hip and just pushed me just a couple of times, very slightly. And that little bit of push made me feel like it was a turbo. It was just a little bit of a push. And that little bit made the difference in me being able to get up front. So what I'm saying is races and power, things like that, are won by just minute amounts, right? It wasn't a huge push to get up the hill. So whenever you're doping or doing anything like that, it's not a huge push. It's just that little bit. Racers are won by, half a wheel length after 150 miles, because everybody, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So any little bit of help can get you over the finish line first. But you don't just, I think people think that Lance doped and then just sat on the couch.
Yeah.
That's just not anywhere near what the truth is. He had the work ethic. He had the strength. He was a God-given athlete, plus he doped.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was all three of those.
Right.
All three of those things. So I'd like to talk to him about all that and his perspective now and what he feels like.
There's a show, I think it's on Hulu. It's a reality show. It's weird how all this stuff keeps coming back to Star Trek, but it's hosted by William Shatner. It's called Stars on Mars. The premise of it is, they go out to Australia in the middle of nowhere and recreate the Mars environment and habitation,
that's funny,
enclosure, and all this stuff. And they have all these different celebrities compete to see who outlasts everybody else. And Lance Armstrong was one of the.
Is that right?
Yeah, he was one of the contestants. And one of the challenges they had to do was a bike challenge. It was interesting watching him.
Oh, that's funny.
Like all of a sudden, just like surge in confidence. Like, oh, we got this.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I got it. What? I'd like to see that.
Yeah. I'll have to send you a link to it.
That's funny. Anyway, that's a long story.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how you talk about dictating the pace of the race, because that actually ties in with what we're going to be talking about with Joseph today.
Good.
Yeah, and his brothers.
Good. Very good. Josh, I got to tell you, man, there's so many times that whenever I was still riding the road bike, what like most people know that Lance ride, there's so many times whenever I came back to Christ that I'd be riding and I think, man, this is just like the Bible story, da-da-da-da-da-da. You know what I mean? Just depending on people and the giving what you can give at the front, coming back and getting back into the group and relaxing and recovering and going up front and doing it again. There's so many things that are similar to being a Christian and leading a life following Christ. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of sports will.
Now, that question was, If I remember correctly, what two guests?
What two
was
guests,
it two
yeah.
guests each, or one for each of us?
I'm just going to do one, so you
Okay.
can do one or two.
Mine won't be as quick, but I mean, mine won't be as long.
I'm sure it won't.
Because I don't really have a story to go along with it, but there's a ton of options that I would go with, but probably as far as like the density of information that I want to get out of someone, I'm obsessed with like history and biblical history and all that stuff.
Genealogy.
Yeah, genealogy. There's a lot of information that's missing about how the world looked prior to the flood.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to interview someone like Noah, since you said alive or dead.
Yeah.
I would love to interview someone like Noah and ask him some. Noah was an interesting guy. He spent 120 years building this, preparing for, and building this huge ship, thing that had never been built before, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
To that scale. So, he had to have some engineering background. He was constantly trying to convince the people around him of what was coming. So, he was a preacher. He lived for over 900 years. So, talk about a knowledge of history, all that kind of stuff. So, I would love to interview someone like Noah and ask him, like, how did the world change before and after the flood? Like, even basic questions, like as you're coming down off of the mountain where the boat landed, did you notice a difference in oxygen? Things like that.
Okay. All right.
Because
Good.
there's a lot of details about the pre-flood world that, if we knew them, they could fill in a lot of gaps in geological history.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, have you thought about another one?
Oh yeah. I mean, there's tons.
What's your second one?
I would love to interview Adam.
Okay.
Or Eve. I would love to, if we're leaving Bible sources, because there's a bunch of people in the Bible I'd love to talk to.
Yeah.
If we're leaving Bible sources, I would love to talk to someone like Isaac Newton.
Okay.
Or there's a YouTube guy that I really enjoy watching his videos. He's an engineer in Alabama, and he's also a Christian, and he does he has this YouTube channel called Smarter Every Day, but he also does a podcast with a friend of his from, I think, Montana, and they often talk about the like the crossover, or the how engineering and history and philosophy and Bible and all that stuff kind of overlap and relate to each other. And I love that podcast too.
Is that the guy who took us through the Kodak?
Yes.
Kodak.
Yeah.
That was really good. What is film and how does it work and all that stuff.
Yeah, and he just seems like a cool guy just to kind of hang out with, you know.
I think he'd go to Marcus Point if he lived in Pensacola.
Yeah.
He seems like he would.
Yep.
Awesome, man. Those are. I can see why you would you'd want to interview those people. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can one day.
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what do you think about our main topic today, Josh?
Real quick.
Yeah.
I want to add this in too, because you mentioned I'm obsessed with genealogies in my own family tree.
Yes.
I would love to interview a couple people as well.
For sure,
Yeah.
right? Absolutely.
But anyway.
That would be good.
Yeah.
I've been looking through pictures again. My mother and I are still doing this project, and just seeing so many pictures in black and white of people sitting before it was fashionable to smile.
Yeah.
They're just sitting there and they looking, pictures taken. I don't know. I'd like to be the photographer back then to see how those shoots went and interview people.
I wonder what it would be like to live in a world where photography doesn't exist. We take that for granted because there's always been painting and sculptures and all that kind of stuff, but that's different than a photograph. A photograph is like a record of this is exactly what was happening in this frame. Painting and sculptures and stuff is like, this is something we're going to make that represents something about reality,
Yep.
whereas a picture is this is reality.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
living in a world where you don't have the ability to record reality.
It's unthinkable.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. I'm thankful that I live in a time where there's still recorded history of before photography and when it was first invented and where
Yeah.
we are now. And we talk about Chris is part of the photography workshop that we do every second Saturday at Marcus Point.
Mm-hmm.
And him and I always frequently talk amongst ourselves about what in 50 years from now, what is photography going to be?
Yeah.
You know, people are not printing photographs like these do.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to let everybody know we're still printing.
Yeah.
You can still go to the drugstore. You can find a picture on your phone, and you can pay 45 cents, and you can get a print of that within a half hour. You can
Mm-hmm.
still do that, and the prints are great.
Yeah.
The prints are great. I do it all the time. And what our little team of people are doing is we're learning to print a lot of the pictures. We're taking more pictures than ever, Josh, but we're not
Mhm.
looking at as many pictures as we used to.
Yeah.
We're just not, and that's part of history. We used to be called historians.
Right.
I bought a book at a thrift store the other day. I showed Chris, and Chris used to be in Special Forces. He's a big deal. I don't know if y'all knew that. Chris is a pretty big deal. It was a war. I can't remember what war
Now
it
he's
was.
just special.
Yeah, now he's special. He looked at this little book and said, "Man, this is graphic," and it was very graphic pictures of soldiers that
Mhm.
did not go home to see their families.
Yeah.
But that is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff is valuable. What was First World War like? Well, we've got pictures
Yeah.
to show that.
Some of my favorite pictures are ones where I think I've talked about this before, but are ones where they'll take an old picture of like a war-torn town in
Yeah.
World War I or World War II, a black and white photo, and they'll position the camera in the exact same spot that camera was, and they'll take a picture today.
Yeah.
And they'll sort of overlap them to where like the modern picture sort of fades into the old picture and vice
Yeah.
versa.
Yeah.
And that tickles a specific part of my brain that relates to how my interests develop in biblical history and stuff like that too,
okay.
because when we're reading about the life of Joseph, the life of his brothers and stuff like that, and the land that they were in, it talks about him going to Shechem and then going to the valley of Dothan and all these different areas. Those places still exist, and you can still visit them today. And one of the ones that's so striking to me in my mind is, the Christmas story that we always read about, during that season is, the angels coming to the shepherds and, telling them about Jesus. Well, those are the same fields that Boaz courted Ruth in. And,
Wow.
right outside the Bethlehem. And those are still fields where people keep sheep today, and you can go and walk those fields. And
Wow.
to walk those fields, I do this in downtown Pensacola sometimes because there's such a history here. I'll walk down Pensacola and I'll be reading the different historical plaques, and I'm thinking, the only difference between me, I'm pretty much walking the same, the same square footage as these Civil War battles that happened or some significant event. Really, the only thing preventing me from reaching out and touching that historical figure or putting my hand on that cannon or something like that is there's this spatial distance between us called time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm standing in that exact spot, and
It's
to me
overwhelming.
that blows my mind. To
Yeah.
think about it that way, and especially when we're talking about Bible stuff, is like, I've probably drank some of the same molecules of water that Joseph drank.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That. Whenever you think about that, I think the older we get to, the more those things become more valuable to us. You know, I think they really do.
This past Christmas, I was able to go and visit the old site in Massachusetts where my great grandfather set up the first forge in Massachusetts, and I was able to stand there where that forge was.
Wow.
And part of it's been restored and is upkept as a historical marker.
Okay.
And to stand there where my ancestors were,
Yes.
and walk that same ground, there's something about that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
it means
fantastic.
something.
Absolutely, it means
Yeah.
something. It's intangible.
Yeah.
Right? I'm sure there's a better word for it, but there's something that changes your chemistry a little bit whenever you're
It does.
experiencing something like that.
It's almost like, it's almost like I can communicate. I mean, that's a weird way of putting it,
Yeah.
but it's almost like now we have something in common.
Gotcha.
You
Right.
know, and like we would have something to talk about now.
Wow. Yeah.
if I were ever to interview him on the
Right.
podcast.
Right.
Like, hey, I went to your forge
How about
400 years later.
How about that? That's really cool.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, what do you think about the?
Yeah. So getting back to this, right? On Sunday mornings, we're kind of going through this series about the life of Joseph, and there's this. If you're paying attention, there's this slightly confusing thing that might grab you. A lot of times he spends in Genesis 37 because that's where Joseph he's been sent to go to his brothers, and the brothers are watching the father's flock in Shechem, and so Joseph goes up to Shechem. They're not there. He asks around. They say, "Oh, he actually went up to the Dothan Valley." And if you look at this on the map, Dothan Valley, which is not Dothan, Alabama, that's kind of the running joke, but Dothan in Israel,
Because we're not very far from Dothan,
right? Because we're not
Alabama.
far from Dothan, Alabama, but Dothan in Israel is this huge plain in a valley that's surrounded by mountains. Perfect place for sheep. And so he goes up there, and his brothers see him coming, and his brothers hate him, and they start plotting about what to do about Joseph because they just want to get rid of him.
He's daddy's boy.
Yeah, he's daddy's boy, and it's funny because the suggestion is let's kill him. Let's just get rid of him altogether. We'll go tell dad, something bad happened to him, or
He's eaten
whatever.
by an animal.
Yeah, and there were two brothers that sort of resisted that idea. Reuben, he was the oldest of the what eventually were 12 brothers. There were 11 at this time, but Reuben, he's like, no, let's not kill him. Let's send a message. We're just going to throw him in a pit, and it was Reuben's plan that we're just going to send him a message. We're going to throw him in a pit. I'll go get him later, and bring him back to dad and be like, look, I'm kind of reading between the lines here, but look, if you're going to favor this kid above the rest of us, take this as a message. We're not going to put up with it.
Yeah, he may fall into more pits.
Yeah.
to think that killing him was a valid option.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're sitting around a campfire. How about we kill him?
Yeah. And most of them were cool with it. Yeah, right?
Right.
Yeah, like, yeah,
I didn't think about that. That would
I like
take
the way
care
you
of-
think.
Yeah,
you know?
that's right.
And so Reuben's like, no, let's not kill him. Let's throw him into a pit. And then so they do that. And then Judah's like, let's not bring him back to dad. Let's sort of modify this a little bit. Let's sell him into slavery. And that's why Joseph ends up in Egypt. They sell him to the Midianites, and the Midianites sold him to Egypt, and Egypt he ends up being purchased by Potiphar, and from there we remember the accounts of him getting involved with, allegedly getting involved with Potiphar's wife and all that stuff.
Right.
And it starts that narrative of Joseph going from slave to second in command. And and then they take his coat of many colors and they rip it up, dip it in I think goat's blood, bring it back to dad's like, hey, sorry, dad, something must have got him. It's wilderness area.
Right.
So you don't have your favorite son anymore. Sorry about that. And it just devastated his dad. And for the longest time, his dad, as far as his dad knew, Joseph was dead.
Yeah. Right. He mourned him.
Yeah.
Probably started getting over it and living his life. And
Yep. But you can see later on he still held on to the memory of Joseph because eventually, the reason that he loved Joseph so much was because of Joseph's mother. Because remember, Jacob, he wanted Rachel, and he was tricked into marrying Leah.
That's right. Yeah.
And instead of staying with that, he's like, no, I'm going to also acquire a second wife, Rachel. And God never condones multiple wives and all this stuff, and it caused a tremendous amount of problems in his family. This is one of them: hatred among the brothers.
He knew,
but Rachel was the quote unquote wife that he loved, and when Rachel had a son, Joseph, that was the favorite son. Later on, after Joseph had been sold in slavery, Rachel had Benjamin, and Benjamin became the favorite son, and that becomes an issue later on when the brothers are reintroduced to this weird guy they've never met before, this powerful guy in Egypt they've never met before, who just happens to be the long-lost brother that they thought had long since been sold in slavery and dead.
Wow.
So that's Genesis 37 ends with him being sold to the Midianites, and then oftentimes we jump to not Genesis 38 to pick up the story, but Genesis 39 to pick up the story, and that's a little bit. That should grab your attention, because the first thing I ask is, well, what happened in chapter 38? Like, why do we skip? Well, in those television shows where you're following multiple storylines at once, and it'll give you like part of a storyline, and then it'll sort of stop, and then it'll kind of go back in time, or it'll go to a parallel storyline and develop that, because ultimately these two separate storylines are going to merge together and affect each other. Well, that's what happens in Genesis 38. So Genesis 38 says, after the events of chapter 37, it focuses on Judah. Well, Judah, on his way back home from the events of them conspiring against Joseph and watching the father's flock and all that stuff, on his way back home, they all live in the land of Canaan, where eventually their descendants are going to come back and inherit. But right now they're just a small family that lives in the land of Canaan. And so Judah, on his way home from all this, he happens to encounter this Canaanite girl that he falls in love with, marries, has a couple kids with, all this stuff, and he has his oldest son. His oldest son's name is and finds a wife as well named Tamar, who's also a Canaanite. Well, dies. And the way the tradition works is there's a concept in Scripture called the near kinsman. So if a husband dies, his wife is up for redemption. The nearest kinsman, it's his responsibility to step in where the husband can't any longer because of his death. And there's any number of reasons why that might not be able. Maybe he's already married. Maybe he doesn't have the ability to financially or whatever. And so if he's unable to, it's usually counted as a dishonor to him, because he can't fulfill the role of a near kinsman.
Gotcha. Right.
And so it'll go to the next nearest kinsman, and he becomes the one. And this is actually a really important aspect of the book of Ruth, because Boaz wasn't the near kinsman of Ruth. There was one who was nearer that wasn't able to redeem her, and so the responsibility passed to Boaz, which he wanted. Well, similar idea here. The next son of Judah, it was his responsibility to take Tamar as his wife, because he was available. Well, one of the roles is the first son that happens that occurs between you and that wife becomes sort of like assigned the role of the firstborn son of the dead husband, so that there's still an ability for the inheritance of that late husband to pass to his quote unquote firstborn son.
Right.
So raising up seed to his brother. He didn't want to do that. He still wanted to have sex with her, but he didn't want to raise up seed to his brother. So that was considered evil in the sight of God, because there's a spiritual significance to the role of the near kinsman.
Gotcha.
Christ is our near kinsman. So one of the primary reasons for the role of this near kinsman was because this was an ongoing picture of what Christ was going to one day do as our kinsman. By the way, that's a really cool aspect of the story of Boaz and Ruth too, because there is, in our lives as Christians, or let's even back up a little bit. In our lives as sinners, there is a nearer kinsman that has the responsibility of redeeming us, and that's the law. But the law doesn't have the ability to redeem us. The next kinsman is Jesus. He has the ability to redeem us, and he's fulfilled in our lives what the law couldn't do. So that picture of Boaz and the nearer kinsman, travels through, and so that's why that's why God took this so seriously, that the responsibility of the nearer kinsman was done away with. Like he didn't want to do that, and so the next son of Judah died. Well, he had a third son, but he was a little kid at this time. Tamar is an adult woman. Judah was like, well, hold off for several years. Once this kid's old enough to have a wife, then we'll make that happen. Well, that's problematic, obviously. Yeah. So here we have this little kid's son, who's technically the nearer kinsman, but he can't marry Tamar. So who's the next one in line? It's Judah. Judah is the nearest kinsman that has the ability to marry Tamar. Another thing too is Judah's wife, that the Canaanite woman that he married, had recently died, and so Judah was mourning for his wife. It says he was comforted, and he went up to this other town to be with the people that were keeping his sheep. So let me just go to work, get my mind off of this, whatever. And in that town was Tamar, waiting patiently for the next kinsman in line to redeem her. Well, it was obvious that the youngest son wasn't going to do that. So Judah, it was his responsibility. So we have this account in Genesis 38 of Tamar disguising herself as a harlot. Judah, wanting to be, he's out with the guys, working hard all day, and he sees this lady off in the distance, thinks she's a harlot, and strikes this deal with her that says, hey, in exchange for your services, I'll give you X, Y, and Z, as soon as I get back home. Well, that's all well and good, but how do I know that's going to happen? So she asks, all right, give me some sort of pledge that payment will come once you get home. So he gives him, Judah gives Tamar like his ring, signet, a couple things, and she keeps that. Well, she ends up getting pregnant and shows up in Judah's hometown a little while later. Said, hey, I'm with child, and everyone starts. That's a dishonorable thing for a lady, an unmarried lady, to show up pregnant, because that means she was doing stuff outside of marriage, and so they're like, well, we need to punish this chick. And she's like, well, I'm actually spoken for. Here's the ring and the stuff of the guy who's speaking for me.
Yeah.
And Judah immediately recognizes, that's my stuff. That's Tamar. I did not know that was Tamar. And immediately has a change of heart. He's like, she's more righteous than I am. I was supposed to voluntarily redeem her because I'm the nearer kinsman, and I was not fulfilling that role. And she took matters into her own hands. She's more righteous than I am. And
Wow.
you see this transformation in Judah's mind about responsibility to his family, responsibility to God, and all this stuff start to take place as a result of that. And it ends up she's pregnant with twins, a kid named Pharez and a kid named Zerah. Pharez was the one that eventually became, in that line of Judah, Pharez, it went to Boaz, who we talked about earlier. Boaz was like the grandfather of, I think, great grandfather of King David. David, obviously, the line of Christ. So this whole line between Judah and Tamar, starting with Pharez, went all the way to Christ. A direct lineage there. The other kid, Zerah, because it was twins, we see some of his descendants show up periodically through Scripture, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Some of his descendants were said to have wisdom, almost like Solomon. They're influential in the nation of Israel, and there's another descendant of Zerah that we find in the book of Joshua, a guy named Achan, who, when they came through and destroyed Jericho, they said, these are the first fruits. All the spoils of this war go to God. Well, Achan took some stuff for himself,
Right.
and we remember that account. Well, Achan was a descendant of the other kid, Zerah. So Judah and Tamar, they have twins, Pharez and Zerah. Pharez ends up David, Christ. Zerah ends up these other guys, and Achan, all this stuff. Well, anyway, that's all in chapter 38 of Genesis. Right in between, his brothers sell Joseph into slavery, and Joseph is in Egypt working for Potiphar. There's this chapter 38 there about Judah. And it picks up in the life of Joseph, going through 38, 39, 40, all that stuff, and we get to chapter 42, and there's famine all throughout the land.
It's Genesis, you said?
Yeah, Genesis.
Okay.
There's famine all throughout the land, just like Joseph had prophesied from that dream that Pharaoh had. And the famine has hit Joseph's family, and there's Jacob and his 11 sons, his 11 other sons, living in the land of Canaan. They have no food, and so Jacob, Genesis 42 starts out, says, when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do ye look upon one another?" And he said, "Behold, I've heard that there's corn in Egypt, so get you down thither, buy for us some thence, that we may live and not die." And Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy corn in Egypt. They left Benjamin behind at his father's request, because remember, Benjamin was the only remaining son of the wife that he loved, Rachel.
Yeah.
And so the 10 other sons went down to Egypt. Benjamin stayed back. And this becomes an issue that Joseph focuses on, because they don't know that Joseph is Joseph.
Yeah.
And they come and they're talking to this guy who's second command in all of Egypt, and this guy accuses them of being spies. He knows who they are. They don't know who he is. He's an Egyptian dude for all they know.
Yeah.
Zaphnath Paneah is his Egyptian name, and so he accuses them of being spies and says, "Okay, prove you're not spies. Tell me about your family." And they tell him, "We have a dad back home and family, and our younger brothers at home, and we're just a small family, whatever." He's like, "Okay, prove you're not spies. Go bring me your younger brother." They don't want to do that because this is the last younger brother, and this is the brother that they know Dad's fond of. And it's interesting how the attitude is different. It's not, sure, let's bring him, keep him for all we care.
Yeah.
It's protecting him, and so it goes back and forth. Joseph plays some games with him, and sends him back with corn, with food, and puts all their money back in their bags again. So when they get home and open it up, they're like, "Oh no, we just stole from Pharaoh." And they avoid going back because they know the next time they go back, they're expected to bring Benjamin with them. And but eventually they run out of food again, and the dad's like, "Okay, we gotta go back to Egypt." And they say, "Well, we can't without Benjamin." And Jacob, he's like, I don't want you to bring Benjamin. I already lost Joseph. I don't want to lose Benjamin again.
Right.
And then Judah pipes in. So Judah was the one that suggested they sell Joseph into slavery. Yeah. Judah's attitude towards Benjamin is entirely different. He said, Judah said unto his dad, "Send the lad with me, and we will arise, go, that we may live and not die, both we and thou, and also our little ones. I will be surety for him." So in other words, I will make sure that he comes back. If my hand shalt thou require him, if I bring him not unto thee and set him before thee, then let me bear the blame forever. For except we had lingered, surely now we had returned this second time. So in other words, Judah says, I will be responsible for him. If something happens to him, take the punishment out on me. It's amazing to see how his attitude has changed now from I hate this kid, I'm jealous of this kid, let's get rid of him, let's sell him into slavery, to, okay, I'll be responsible for him. If something happens to him, you can have my life instead.
Protecting him at all costs.
Protecting him at all costs, right? And so, as the chapters progress, 43, 44, Joseph continues to test his brothers, because when they come to him again, show him Benjamin, they're like, okay, go back, but Benjamin has to stay here with me. And obviously that's a problem. They arrange a deal with him, like, okay, keep me instead. I think it was Reuben that said that. Keep me instead. Let Benjamin go. Well, he lets all of them go, but he puts his cup in Benjamin's sack, so that when they get home, it's not that they find all their money, they find the Pharaoh's cup.
Goodness
And so Joseph sends people after him to stop him on the way home, like, hey, why'd you steal the guy's cup? And once they open up all their bags, they find it's in Benjamin's. They're like, oh no, he's Benjamin. Why did you steal this guy's cup? Man, I didn't steal it, And so they're freaking out. Like, not only did he accuse us of being spies, now we look like thieves that were stealing, the royal cup from the royal house. Like, what is going to happen? And you see the brothers rally around to protect Benjamin, and Judah offering himself in Benjamin's in case something happens to Benjamin. Reuben offering to stay as a prisoner instead of Benjamin. They are all rallying around Benjamin to protect him, because there was a responsibility now to their family that they realized. And I think that little piece of story that was inserted between those two chapters, 37 and 38, where Judah is learning the responsibility of family and learning his role as one of the elder brothers and the nearer kinsmen. I think there was a lot that changed in Judah's life in that chapter that changed his attitude towards Joseph and Benjamin as time went on. And it's interesting to watch that transformation.
What do you think? What was the difference? I mean, did they get a good talking to by their dad, or did they just wise up?
Well, I think
Joseph and Benjamin.
I think it goes back to what Judah said when Tamar revealed herself. He said, "You've been more righteous than I've been." Okay. And I think that, here again, I'm reading between the lines, but I think that experience taught him, there's a responsibility that I've been rejecting in my life, and I need to now pursue righteousness. Okay. And part of that righteousness is humility. Part of that righteousness is love. And regardless of how unfair I may think, Dad's attitude towards my younger brother is, or towards anyone, no matter what the other circumstances are, if I need to stand for what's right, even if everyone around me is doing wrong.
So you think his brothers kind of adopted that attitude as well.
At least to some degree.
Yeah,
because you see their brothers rallying
Right.
around Benjamin.
Right.
And even later on when Joseph finally reveals himself, they start freaking out and like, we are so sorry. You know, you have every right to kill us.
Yeah.
You know, do whatever. And Joseph, you know, amazing as Joseph was, he just said, no, you know, you meant it for evil. God meant it for good. And Joseph saw the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And responded accordingly.
Wow. I wonder why we skip over that. Why do most of us skip over that?
It's an uncomfortable story.
Yeah, it is.
To talk about in mixed company or in a church
Sure.
setting sometimes, because it's, you know, a guy's wife dies, he goes and finds a prostitute, and
Right.
Kids getting born outside of marriage, and you know, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess so. That's fascinating, though. It really is. Thanks for bringing that to us, Josh. Appreciate it. And that's all a part of the returning to praise.
Life of Joseph.
Life
Yeah.
of Joseph.
Yeah.
But the bigger the church is doing a.
Yeah, the church is doing a Bible study called Return to Praise. This
Right.
is part of the Pastor's Sunday series that he's doing on the life of Joseph.
Gotcha,
It ain't
gotcha.
over till it's over.
That's right.
Yeah.
Over till it's over. Last night we did a cool Bible study too in Gun Club. So. Listen, if you're listening in Pensacola, come see us on Wednesday night, right?
Yep.
We always have a good time in there. And,
A103, room A103.
102.
102,
Yep, 102. And there's 35, 40 other classes that you can be a part of.
Yep.
I had a guy come in, a person came in the church last night, and somebody asked me to help him find, quote, the service. And I said, what do you mean the service? He said, well, where's the service tonight? I said, well, we don't have a. He said, y'all don't have a service on Wednesday? He said, oh, and I realized he's new, and I said, okay, we don't. That sounds funny.
Yeah.
But we have, 35, 40 classes on Wednesday night.
Right.
And I found a pamphlet and gave it to him. He said, oh, okay, all this stuff happens on. I said, yeah, man. I said, if I were you, I'd go to every one of them.
Yeah.
I'd start at one that looks interesting, and then go to another one the next Wednesday night, and another one the next Wednesday night. And I realized
It's going to be awkward when he goes to the sewing club.
yeah, that's right. But I realized, wow, a new person coming in, I guess that is kind of weird.
Yeah. I never
You
really
know.
thought about it.
We used to have Pastor Godfrey used to do a quote service in the main auditorium on Wednesday night, along with the other classes. Now he stopped doing that, and we just have other classes. Other classes. But it just reminded me how unique our church is, and how we do things, and we evolve. Sometimes, maybe we'll have another main service on Wednesday night, but there's the way that our big church touches everybody in a way that feels like a small church is by small groups.
Yep.
That's what it is. My job on Wednesdays right now as a photographer is to go to every small group and take pictures and to be able to tell the story of what small groups are.
Yeah.
And it's really, I'm in a unique situation. I could see every small group. I'm in, let's see, I'll be doing number 6 on Sunday. And we got some really powerful things happening in this church for sure.
Well, I came from a small church, so small groups feels kind of like a Wednesday night service that we used to do.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Josh, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Chris, thanks. Appreciate you. And we will see everybody and talk to everybody next Thursday. Thanks, everybody.